Hello and welcome to the Business of Hearing podcast. And I'm excited because today's guest is interesting, inspirational, and helpful. Because today's guest has built a highly successful private practice on the West Coast. And in a recent conversation with a mutual friend we both have, they referred to it as one of the most successful private practices in the US. And I've been looking forward to this interview to understand how, why, what has been the key steps in order to drive it to the $5 million in revenue. And luckily for us, today's guest was very open, sharing her story, sharing the key steps, sharing the challenges, sharing the ups, sharing the downs, and sharing, I suppose, the overall blueprint of the key steps that she's taken in order to build such a successful business. And then one thing I really wanted to double down on, which we discussed, was the decision that she made to stop seeing patients and spend her time working on the business. What were her challenges before that moment? What was that transitional phase look like? What has been the impact on the business overall? What would her advice be to anybody looking to make the same steps? So today's guest is Dr. Sunni McBride from South Bay Hearing and Mission Audiology. And I'm excited to get stuck in.
Welcome to the Business of Hearing podcast, the podcast for high-performing hearing care clinics that want to learn the strategies, ideas, and truths behind some of the smartest private practice clinics in the world. Now, time for your hosts, Phil M. Jones and Ollie Luke.
So I'm joined today by Dr. Sunni McBride from South Bay Hearing and Mission Audiology. Sunni, how are you?
Hi, Ollie. Doing great.
Good, and I'm excited for our conversation. So I suppose the best starting point is give us the story. How have you got to where you are today?
Okay. When I got my degrees early on, I worked just a couple of years, and then I took time off. I raised a family of 5 children, and so I was really out of the business for about 20 years. As kids started going to college, things got expensive, and so I thought, well, maybe I should go back and push those buttons again. And so I contacted the PhD audiologist I had worked with before, and he immediately said, come back and work for me. And I said, I don't remember anything. And he said, don't worry, I'll teach you. So I started back part-time because I still had some kids at home. And boy, things have sure changed in 20 years. When I got my degrees, they didn't even talk about selling hearing aids and things like that. So I not only had to refresh all my diagnostic audiology training, but I had to learn a whole new business, which was hearing aids. And so I worked with this gentleman for 11 years, gradually working into full-time work. And then it became, I divorced, remarried. I decided that I wanted to work on my own. I had an opportunity to purchase a small business in our community. And so I got married one month and purchased the business the next month. So that was kind of a wild ride. The business actually was perfect to purchase because it was run so poorly. So all we had was upside, I guess. It was a single owner. He had a single secretary working for him. The practice was pretty cheaply run. I had 2 small booths that you could crawl into practically. They weren't even, full-size booths that you could sit up in. It was really crazy. But we started off, I think he did about $750,000 a year. I think within the first year, I got it up to $1 million a year, just myself and a secretary. And I wanted to transform it. I had worked in a very good practice before. And so I wanted to take ideas that I had learned there and then put my own twist on it. I wanted to create a practice that was different than any other practice in my area, that people would just go, oh my, this is really different. The first secretary that I inherited with the business, the previous owner said, I would keep her on. She's really good. She lies really well for you. I mean, that's the quality of the business that I was buying. And she was a sweet person, and she helped me. But, as I got busier, I quickly got to the point where I knew I couldn't do it all. And so I think the first major leap is when you hire someone else to be another professional. For those of you who haven't read it, I think the book, what is it, oh my gosh, I'm forgetting it.
The EMyth.
The EMyth, thank you. I was
Yep.
going to say be patient. I was so tied into audiology. I'm sorry there. The EMyth is a great book because I think it profiles so many healthcare professionals. You know, we are highly trained, we are charismatic, and so we think we have the mojo, we have the secret sauce, which allows us to make patients want to come see us. And so to train someone else to come in and work with you, and do they have the mojo? Do they have the secret sauce? What are they going to do? It really is a leap of faith to be able to relinquish control and to have faith in someone else. And so it's interesting, when I bought that business, the first people that I hired to work for me, new secretaries, this new healthcare professional, I either hired family or people that I knew. Which has its pluses and its minuses. You know, hopefully you know people and their strengths. But then when things go south, sometimes it gets dicey to remove them, shall we say. So be careful who you hire. But I wanted people who really cared about the elderly and were kind and sweet and fun and very professional. So I think my first leap of faith was training someone to be a co-professional with me. The second leap of faith was when I decided to leave the office that I purchased the business in and to move to a better space, build it out, invest that money in a busier corner, you know, just all the things that go into changing a known location to a new location. That was a little scary, but we did it. The practice kept growing. I got it up to about 2 other professionals. So there were 3 of us working here. And we were, you know, getting close to 2 million. And I was fortunate in that at this point, my kids were gone and I just had a new husband to make happy. And he worked with me in the business. Some nights we'd be here till 10:30 at night. I remember one night I just turned to him and I said, "I'm so sorry, I'm keeping you here late like this." And he said, "What else would we be doing? This is great." You know? And I thought, man, I married the right man. You know? And so it's been great having him by my side to scheme and plan. He's not an audiologist, but he's more of a business person. So he was helpful. But I got to a point where I was doing everything. I did hire a business manager. So whether you call it a business manager, an office manager, or whatever, she was key to relieve some of the mundane things that I had to do. But still, I was pulling late nights frequently. And I wanted to grow. I just didn't know what else to do. In reading a lot of business books, they talked about key performance indicators, KPIs. And it made sense. I didn't know how do you get these KPIs? How do you track them? What's the system? And you know, I just had all of these business questions, and I just didn't have enough time in the day to see patients and do everything. So the next big step was when I joined Audigy, the audiology management company, and that was probably about 10 years ago. And the Beauty of Audigy, I had dabbled with some other buying groups before just because I wanted to get discounted hearing instruments. But the Beauty of Audigy was they systematically surveyed some of the best practices across America, and they tried to determine what the best practices were, not only from an audiological standpoint, but also from a business standpoint. And they really have a great team of people whose sole purpose is to help you fulfill your goals. They're not out there trying to make you, you know, they're not driving around in Cadillacs and saying, you know, if you're good like me, you can be rich like me. You know, I mean, that was never, it was always about building your people. How do you build and train your people to help them achieve their goals so you can achieve your goals? So I like that attitude. They really break down the business of audiology into 5 components. You have your finances, operations, marketing, HR, and professional development. And they have 5 people assigned to help you specifically, and they become your team. And so it was through them and the business systems, which they helped me implement, that I was able to track my KPIs and train people how to do that. I was able to get regular financial reports done in a very professional way, in a very timely manner. I now had a marketing manager. I mean, I still say the majority of my time is spent on marketing. You know, it's all about how do we get people through the door. And even with a marketing manager and the help of you here at Orange and Gray, I always say I never met a marketing piece I didn't like. So you know, we just do so much marketing. But then HR, I've grown my team now. I have 2 offices. We have room for 4 audiologists in one office, 2 audiologists in the other. But it became a pretty large organization. And even with Audigy's help, we were able to grow it. I think our peak was a little over 5 million. Now with COVID and things, we're about 3.5. So, you know, we've got I try to have, my goal is to have $5 million providers a year. Yeah, each year. And this year we're not going to quite make it, but I've had, you know, several every year that can provide at that level. And I used to be one of them. You know, I could generate over $1 million a year in the revenue. But, you know, once again, trying to be the boss and to drive that kind of revenue just takes a lot of energy and a lot of time. And so a few years ago, I thought, I'm going to pull back. I'm going to only see patients 3 days a week. And so I'm going to give myself 2 days a week to manage the business. And so I scheduled that, and it kind of worked for a while, but what do you know? Patient creep. You still have the mojo, and people still love you, and they want to see you, although they see my other providers too, but it was just too easy. And then I had an employee who had a baby who moved home to Minnesota, and so we had to absorb her, you know. And so I hate to say this, but during about a 15-month period, I lost 4 of my 5 audiologists. I had a guy that was making selling almost $2 million a year for me, gone, you know. And of those 4, I had 2 that went to become lovely competitors, 1 that left to have a baby, and 1 that left to help her husband run a business. So then I was scrambling to find a replacement, and instead of having, I ended up with 5 male audiologists working for me. And I don't know how in this business of mostly females, I ended up with 5 males, but let me tell you, it's great. Very much less drama, just different energy in the office. It's been a lot of fun. So I had hired, I had myself still working, and it was about 3 years ago that I went on an extended vacation. I'm in my 60s, for those of you who don't know me. Type A, you know, a lot of energy kind of person. And about 3 years ago, I went on an extended vacation for 3 weeks to the Middle East. And the kind of traveling it was and how we did it, I really had to disconnect from my office. I just couldn't. And I traveled to Europe before where I'd use my iPad, and, you know, with times change, you could still check in remotely. But for some reason, the Middle East, I just, you know, put it behind me. And it was life-changing to disconnect myself from a business that I had so fully immersed myself in. I mean, I was at a point where I thought, I don't know if I'm ever going to be able to retire, because all I am is an audiologist business manager, and, you know, what am I going to do every day if I don't do this? And being away, it was like an inspiration that there is life outside of audiology. and that I could function and do a lot of fun things and not be totally immersed in this. And so a year ago, I made the decision. And the other thing was I loved seeing patients. I was good at seeing patients. My patients loved me, and I loved being the problem solver and the font of all knowledge. I mean, it's really an ego boost to do all that. And I'm not a natural business person. And I didn't know, if it meant doing employee interviews all year long and goal setting and things like that. Those are not my favorite things to do in life. And so early on, when people would say, well, what do you want to do, Sunny? How do you see yourself? It was like, well, I think I'll be in patient care forever, and I will hire someone to run my business. And so, but as I went through this transformation of taking time out of my practice, I realized that I thought I was done with patient care. And so a year ago, last October, I made the decision that I had found the final audiologist to hire. And he was an excellent young man. And when I met him, I thought, this is the guy I can turn my personal patients over to. And so brought him into the practice, bright young man. And I made the decision, and I pulled back, and, October of 2019, I stopped seeing patients. And this time it stuck. I only, during the outbreak of COVID, when I almost shut down my offices, I ended up with one audiologist in my main office. And I went down to my secondary office 2 days a week to keep it going myself. I sent the audiologist home there. And so I did that for 2 months, but then as soon as I could, I brought the other man back. And it's been a wonderful transformation for me. And the days that I'm in town, I work full days, and I'm fully immersed in running the business, but I can take time off. I have all my grandchildren are out of the area, so I can go visit when I want. I don't feel the burden of having to work a 9-to-5 schedule every day. So that's a long story, but that's how I got here.
Nice. There's plenty to unpack there. And I suppose the best starting point is like what you've built is a highly successful private practice. What would you say some of the key reasons for that is? Or I don't want to use the term like what are the secrets behind it, but that kind of question, like if you had to give advice to our listeners, what would be some of the key things that have been important to that?
Mm-hmm. Well, the first thing, and I know many of your members after meeting them through Orange and Gray probably embraced this already, but once again, I wanted the patient experience to be remarkable from the moment they saw our advertising to the moment they picked up the phone, the way they were handled on the phones. I wanted the, oh my, when they walked through my door. I wanted it to look impressive, and I had some wonderful front office staff and employees. I had one that was just, her nickname is Lovey Lovey. And she'd have patients and she'd say, oh, you look like you need a hug. Come on over here. I know you need it, and people would just love to come to our office. My husband used to say, what do you do to these people? Because I sit and look out the window, and when they're in the driveway, they're downcast and muttering to each other, and they walk through the door, and by the time they're done spending an hour with you, they're happy people. It's like magic. So I think creating that patient experience cannot be underestimated. To have excellent equipment, to have another thing that Audigy does is it helps you to standardize your presentation. When those audiologists close that door, you have no idea what they're saying to those patients. And so it's very difficult to clone yourself and to multiply your efforts if everybody's winging it and doing their own thing. So Audigy has a process that helps people move through the emotional stages of the selling process. And I think that was key to having a high level of uniformity. I mean, people still make it their own. They're not robots or things like that. But, you know, at least we're all on the same page and we're all trying to, I feel comfortable whether they're seeing me or seeing someone down the hall. I know the kind of presentation that they're getting. So, you know, that interaction with everyone is key. I think having an excellent office manager has been really fundamental for me also. She, I have good support staff. I have what I call my financial coordinator who takes care of all the billing and insurances and everything. So that's an isolated position for me. I have a business manager who takes care of the day-to-day running of the front office and all the minutia that it takes to run a $4 million business. Excuse me, I've done 2 build outs since I moved into this new office. I did the initial build out. I expanded so I could have 4 audiologists working at the same time. And one of the things that we do is, I think we really do well with our aftercare. We want people to come back and see us. The guy I bought the business from, he was always about the new sale. But we wanted to really come through on our brand promise of aftercare. And we were finding that our lobby was getting so crowded of people coming in for cleaning checks and repairs and things like that. So my third build out was building a dedicated repair service center that is staffed by 2 people. And the reason I did this, when I did the calculation, we had over 5,000 lab visits a year. And so when you consider that traffic coming into your main lobby, you can see why I felt like it was unmanageable. And it's been so nice. I have kind of 2 separate doors that are right kind of next to each other. And so it's all, if you had a pediatrician, they usually had a well baby door and a sick baby door. And that's kind of like what we have in audiology. So one door is for our new patients, our happy patients coming to see the audiologist. And the other door is the repair lab side. And, you know, patients can come in for their free cleaning checks, repairs, all that kind of stuff. And it really kind of separates so you don't have people sitting in the lobby hearing, my hearing aid broke down, you know, type of thing. And my husband, always the observer, noticed, he goes, everybody going through that lab is so happy. I think it's because they're getting all that free stuff over there. Right? You know? And that's probably true. But I have really trained the lab that their major purpose is to care for people, develop a relationship, and then to refer them back to the audiology side when they're getting to that 4-year mark. You know, when you know that your technology is no longer serviceable, you haven't had a hearing test, let's send you on over. So that's we need to get more of that from the lab. And with COVID, it's kind of slowed it down. People say, oh yeah, maybe in a few months. But that is, I think it's a key component to differentiate us and to send us over. Other keys, once again, marketing. Marketing. It's all about marketing. And when I started my business, I told my husband, if we're ever going to overspend on marketing, now is the time, because I was just a single little office. Nobody knew me from a load of hay. I was very respectful when I left my previous owner. I didn't take a thing. I didn't take anything, you know, no files, no nothing. Of course, you know, that would be illegal, but I just took myself, you know, I was 4 miles down the road from him, but I bought an existing practice and went to work. So marketing is so critical, and I've been down the road with several different marketing companies, some of which are very expensive, and the justification I thought was, well, if all it takes is spending more money at it, you know, and these people seem good, I'll invest here. And yeah, that's when we got our revenues up to over $5 million. But the costs were so high doing that, that my profitability really wasn't that great. And so I pulled back from that. We started automation, down the automation pathway. About 2 years ago, we transferred all of our data into electronic medical records. I think that is absolutely key if you're going to have a fluid office. And then we started down the automation for automating our database to do database marketing and things. That's been a bumpy road. The automation company was in its infancy 2 years ago. It's now getting better and better and better, so we're starting to reap some of the benefits. And then when I heard about Orange and Gray, I heard Phil speak at several corporate seminars, and so I knew he kind of had a brain that worked in a different way, and I liked the messaging that I heard. And then I agreed to work with Orange and Gray and working with Ollie and the creative team. I think they look at marketing differently, and it's just been kind of a breath of fresh air into the marketing. And I was talking to my team, and they said, we've got all these kind of trickle marketing campaigns. Everything seems a lot more even. You're not just depending on one newspaper drop for the month, and either it works or it doesn't, and investing a lot in digital marketing has been important, especially now as the pandemic has hit, to really boost that. So once again, long-winded.
Perfect. And one thing I'd love to double down on, because I know a lot of private practices, or the owner of the private practices, has an aspiration to stop seeing patients at a stage, step away and work on the business. You've gone through that process. And I'd love to learn a little bit more about that. So prior to doing that and taking that big step, what were some of your big concerns about doing that?
I think my biggest concern was I was worried that I would miss patient care, because I was good at it and I loved it. But I finally got tired of being tied to a schedule, and you can only show people how to put hearing aids in their ears so many times, and kind of the mundane things of audiology were finally getting to me. So I guess maybe too, I wondered what I would do with my days all the time, but trust me, you can fill up your days when you have that many employees and that much revenue you're trying to drive. You can fill up your days.
And how did the transition go? Because I assume you had patients that you'd been taking care of for a long time, who you had to then move on to another provider. Was it as painful as you anticipated, or did it go smooth as expected?
No, once again, the final young audiologist. So each audiologist that I hired replaced another audiologist, right? And so they would take over that book of business. And sometimes if I was too busy, I would spin off patients to the other audiologist from my personal patient group. I always say nothing makes me happier than to see one of my long-term patients walking out of another audiologist door with a big smile on their face laughing, because I know it's been a good transition. And so when the new audiologist came to work with me, he was fresh out of school, but very well trained. And so he shadowed me. And so we spent a couple of months. So he was getting to know my patients. Some people choose to send out a big letter announcing with fanfare, I am no longer seeing patients, and here's, Dr. So-and-so. And I chose not to do that. I decided I would rather do a gentle transition. And I had a few people, I heard a comment that they were surprised and, surprised that we hadn't let them know. But for the most part, people just learned to say Sonny's no longer seeing patients, but she has wonderful audiologists, and we're going to assign you to Dr. So-and-so. she handpicked them. They're the top of their class, and you will love them too. So you prepare your front office staff with a script to say, and then to me, it's a leap of faith. You just have to do it.
Perfect. And what has been the impact on your business since making that transition?
What has been the impact on my business? Well, I walk out the door closer to 5 or 5:30 every day. So personally, it's been really good for me. Our business is more profitable, especially with COVID. We're working on lower revenues, but the COVID forced me to cut expenses in a way that I wouldn't have had the courage to prior to that. I'm such a people person. I staffed up for, kind of 5 million a year of revenue. And then the next year was about 4.5 because I pulled back from some of the heavy marketing things. But I still was overstaffed, but I just didn't have the courage to cut people. And then with COVID and people's life changes, we did cut back on our employees. So that really helped. I don't know how I would have gotten through COVID if I had a full patient life, because especially the first 2 months, I spent so much time online trying to figure out what was our responsibility. Should we be open? How are we going to handle it? What were the financial implications? What were the legal implications? And I spent so much time doing that. I could have never done that if I was seeing patients.
Perfect. And advice, what would your advice be to, I suppose, somebody who's considering making the same leap of faith?
I think you've got to invest in good people. I think you can't be a micromanager. I think if you're a micromanager, you're never going to be able to let go. You have to give people autonomy. You have to hire good people and give the autonomy to make good decisions. We had an audiologist team lunch yesterday, and I said, all right, should we agree to do these an hour every other week? And they all agreed that was a good thing, kind of a round table. Let's, do our problem solving. And we did it by Zoom, sitting in our little offices, even though we're all in the same building. And I said, all right, so who wants to be in charge of the Zoom meetings, even if I'm not here? And one of the audiologists said, I'm willing to do it. I said, all right, you're the Zoom meister. And so we just set them up for, every 2 weeks for the next 6 months. And if I'm in town, I'll be a part of it. And if I'm not, I'm not. And these guys work well together, and I trust them. So you can't be a micromanager. I really think you need some outside help, a company like Audigy or things like that. I rely on them heavily for financial analysis. I've had 2 lawsuits, unfortunately, of disgruntled employees who have left, and so their HR department has helped me navigate all that. So I think you can't do everything yourself. I mean, maybe if you're turning it over to one other person or something, maybe you could, but to have a practice of any size, at least I don't have the business savvy. I need outside help.
Perfect. And I suppose I've got 2 final questions that we ask every guest. And the first one is, if you could give some advice to, I suppose, the younger version of yourself that had just bought this practice, what would that be?
A younger person just getting started. Well, I think the time and money invested up front, will serve you well in the end. Be prepared for some long hours. Once again, don't be a micromanager. Focus your efforts on marketing and people. That's what it's all about. And, just try to develop a consistent processes so that, and if you can document your processes as people leave, then you're just interchanging people. Have a wonderful onboarding process. So as you bring new employees in, you go through the same training process over and over again. Make sure you're on electronic medical records if you haven't done that already. We hired, high school kids and people looking for part-time work to just come in and scan documents, but make that conversion. That's really helpful. Those are
Perfect.
Mm-hmm.
And final question. When you look out at all the private practices across the country, what's one of the common mistakes that you see that many of them still make or are making?
It's interesting. I was a spokesperson for Lyric, and so I got an opportunity to go into many offices, and most of those offices were pretty high class because they were dealing with a top quality product. But your office really projects who you are. And so you really have to have a critical eye. I could always tell if I was in a guy's office versus a woman's office. So, I think you really have to have a critical eye for the patient experience along the way. And true story, I lost one employee. She was a little unhappy with me. And so she went to work for someone, not directly competitor, but, about 45 minutes away. She lasted 1 month. And then she, was talking to Audigy. I ultimately rehired her for my second office, but she lasted 1 month. I recently interviewed a woman to work for me in my secondary office, a middle-aged audiologist. And because of COVID and other changes going on, I couldn't really commit to hiring her. So she called me and she said, I took a job with someone else. I just wanted to let you know. I said, oh, that's great. Who did you go work for? Who are you? And it was the same office that my young woman had left. A month later, the second woman called me and she said, I'm still looking, so if that position is still open. So I don't know what's going on in that office, but it must be vicious because people only last a month, and I think it gets into the micromanaging of people that, you can be too lax, but you can be too strict too. So.
Perfect. Well, that's great. I appreciate your time so much. And I think we touched on some very interesting subjects that will be helpful to many.
Good. Thanks, Ollie. I look forward to working with you. It'll be fun.
Thanks a lot.
And there we have it. That is a wrap. Thank you so much for listening to the Business of Hearing podcast. Make sure you subscribe to be the first to know when a new episode goes live. If you're feeling kind enough to share your experience and leave us a 5-star review, it would mean the world to us. And if you want to learn more, then go to www.orange-grey.com for article guides and trainings specifically written for high-performing hearing care businesses. We look forward to speaking to you again soon.